Could you do it? I hope so. And whether you got it right or wrong actually doesn't matter. The fact is you tried, and that is the most important thing. And have fun in these courses. I'm a firm believer, you actually learn better if you have fun along the way. So with that said, you probably just want to see the solution, and that is what we're going to do now. Let me shrink myself. Here you go. So this is where we left off in the previous lecture. We've got our Visual Studio Code on the left, and we've got our browser and our live site on the right. Let me just get rid of myself so you can see the screen better. And where should we start? Well, obviously we don't have to worry about the CSS. We've done with that. If we scroll down, we've got our first button here. On click, we want to execute this green function, but nothing seems to happen. So how do we do this? The starting point is to access our document object. Remember, this is the root of our document, of our web page. We have to start with this document. And within this document, we've got many properties and methods. The one we want to use, and I told you I want you to use, is getElementsByClassName. What is the class name here? Well, that's right. We added a class called green. So we want to access our class called green. Oh, and you might have got stuck here. You might have been thinking, your next step might have been, well, let's define this in a variable called green button. And then let's now access the style attribute and the background color. You might have gone through this and you might have said, okay, cool, I want that to be green. And then you go here and of course nothing happens. You have to realize what the getElementsByClassName returns. Do you remember what it returns? That's right, it returns a collection. So it means that we can't just access it like it's just one item. Okay, we have to almost treat it like an array, and we have to tell it which item in the array we want to work on. Here we know that we've only got one element with the class green, but your browser doesn't know that, so it always returns a collection. Yes, in this case, our collection is just going to have one item. Just remember that. You might have got stuck there, but don't worry. Okay, that's what I'm here for. So that's what you might have done. I don't even want to go this complicated, okay? I don't want to define a new variable. I just want to access our document getElementsByClassName object straight away. And what I want to do here is I want to access the first item in this collection. And this should return us the exact button we want. You know what? Let me just even prove it to you. Let's actually say let x equals that, and then let's just console log that to the screen. Console log x. Let's now go back to our browser and inspect the console. If we now click on this green button, there we go. There is our button code. How cool is that? And if we hover over it, we can see it's accessing the exact button we want. If we don't have this 0, if we didn't access the first item in the array, in the collection, then look what it does. Let's clear the console, let's click this, and we can see it returns an HTML collection. And that's why we have to actually access the first item within this collection in order to do what we want it to do. Making sense? I hope so, I hope so. So there you go, let's access our first item within the collection. Let's get rid of this variable. Like I said, this is very simple code, so I don't want us to get more complicated by adding variables and all that. Let's just access our document. We've got our button. And remember what we want to do now? That's right, we want to access the style property. And on the style property, we want to access this background color property. And we want to change that to, that's right, we want to change it to green. Let's test our code. Let's save the file. Let's go to our browser and click this button.
Oh yeah.
Whoa, how awesome is this? So there you go. We've literally implemented getElementsByClassName. I hope you're as excited as I am. That's very, very cool. So now we can go very quick because all we need to do is copy this code. Of course, for the blue button, we can copy paste, but we want to access the class name of blue and we want to change the background color to blue. But if we save this and we click on this blue button, nothing's going to happen. Why? That's right. We didn't add the class blue. So your browser hasn't fetched anything. It's an empty HTML collection. So here we want to add the class name blue. Let's put this back there. There you go. So now it should work. If we click the blue button, it's blue. If we click the green button, it's green. On the red, we're going to need to add a class name of red. So let's do that now. We can copy this code. We can paste it under the red function. And we can change the words blue to red. Now it should work on all 3 buttons. Woohoo! You have done so well. Seriously, well done. I'm very impressed, and I hope you managed to figure this much out by yourself. If you didn't, again, don't worry. But this undo button is a little bit more complicated, so you might have not got it. But it is, again, a very simple solution once you actually understand how it all works. So what are we going to do with this undo button? What do you want to happen? We'll just walk through it logically. When a user clicks this undo button, we want this button, this first button, background color to go black, the second button's background color to go black, and the third button's background to go black. So what we're actually wanting to do, and as soon as you start seeing these repetitions, you should automatically think of like a loop. So we're wanting to loop through all our buttons on the page, and we want to change their background color to black. That's all we want to do when we click this undo button. So the first thing is, yes, we can access, we can say, listen, get elements by green, by blue, by red, etc., etc. It's just very repetitive that way. So what I want us to do is I want us to add an additional class to all of the buttons we want to affect. And that class name can be anything. Let's just call it undo. So we're going to add an undo class to every single button. Is that making sense so far? If I save, obviously our browser goes back to the default. But now all our buttons have 2 classes. They have their individual color class, and they also have this undo class. And when the undo button is clicked, I want us to get elements by class name, which returns a collection of all the buttons that have the undo class. And then we want to iterate through those and just change their background back to black. You see, I told you, it's not that difficult. So let's do it. Let's get our buttons. So I'm going to define a JavaScript variable here called buttons. And there, remember what I said I want us to use? I want us to use get elements by class name. In programming, there are many ways to skin a cat, but this is what I want us to do here. I want us to fetch all our buttons by using get elements by class name. What is the class name? Well, we just said it's undo. We've put the undo class on every single button we want to affect. And remember, this get elements by class name returns an HTML collection. So when we've now got a collection of all our buttons. And we prove it to you, well, it's console log buttons to the screen. Okay. We can then go into our browser. We can inspect the elements here. We can go to our console and we can click this undo button. We've got an HTML collection of 3 buttons. The button with classes green and undo, blue and undo, and red and undo. And if we open that up, you can literally see all 3 of our buttons. It's pretty nifty. Let's close that now and let's continue with our code. So we've got our variable called buttons. Actually, I do want to show you something before we continue. Let me go console log again. Let's console log our buttons. I just want to show you something because, yeah, you're going to wonder where I'm getting it from. But this buttons has a length property. So if we go to our console and we click this, we've got our HTML collection. If we open this up, we've got an automatic length property that's provided to us by the DOM API. So we can see here the length is 3. It already knows that there are 3 buttons within our collection. So we're going to use that to our advantage. How are we going to use that? Well, now we've got to loop through each button because remember the user by this stage has clicked on all 3 buttons. We want to loop through each one and change its style, background color to black. So all we have to do is implement a traditional for loop. We can start by defining a variable called I, letting that be 0. And then we know that I has to be less than the button's length. And of course, we increase I on each loop. This is just the general syntax of a for loop. There's nothing special going on here. Now, what do we want to happen? Well, we know we've got our buttons HTML collection. We're wanting now to access whatever I is. So I is going to start off at 0, right? And that's going to access the very first button, which in this case is our green button. And we want to access its style property. We then want to access the background color property and we want to change it to black. It is literally that simple. If I save the page, which I've done here, and we click on these buttons, and now I click on undo, boom, shakalaka. It works. We've literally done our site. If you click on one blue and you go undo, it's gone back to default. There you go. How cool is that? So just remember what we've done, okay? As a quick recap, At the very top of the page, we've just got our styles, our CSS applied to our page, nothing special there. We then have our h1, h2 tag, nothing special again. We then have this div element. We've wrapped everything within this div. I did that for good practice. We didn't actually have to have these div tags in there. But now we had 4 buttons. The first 3 buttons, when you click on them, their color changes. That's all we did. And we did that by adding this on-click event listener. And that's just provided to us by the DOM API. And it's almost like the browser listening for when a user clicks on that button. And we said if the user clicks on this specific button, we want the function green to fire. That function green grabs the button element that it's on, and it just changes its background color to green. So it's very simple. We did that with each button. Then the final button doesn't need a class, does it? Because we don't have to access that specific button. That button just has an on-click event listener, and we fire a function called undo. And this function undo is very simple. We just grab all buttons that have a class name of undo. Yes, we didn't have to do this. Like I said, there are many ways to skin a cat. This was just the easiest way I could think of. Then we take out all our buttons and we loop through them. And on each loop, we just change the background color back to black. So there you have it. I hope you had a lot of fun in this lecture. I know I did. I hope you learned a thing or two, but let's don't stop. We have got plenty more examples to go through, and we're going to be getting more advanced as we go on. So I hope you're enjoying it. See you in the next lecture.